So Jaylen Brown did not perform very well last night in a critical Game 7. I saw this stat on Jaylen Brown. Regular season had 197 turnovers, 232 assists. Jaylen Brown in the postseason had 58 turnovers, 63 assists. That's a little better than 1 assist per 1 turnover. That ain't great.
Man, I had so many bad flashbacks last night watching that game to my experiences working and doing games that James Harden played in the playoffs. The turnovers, the bad shots, the shot selection, when your team needed it most, instead of passing the ball around or passing up an okay shot for a better shot, instead he's forcing 33, 35-foot threes, and he didn't have it going. The turnovers, just bad open floor turnovers, live ball turnovers that turned into easy baskets the other direction. And you beat me to it. I was getting ready to put some stuff on the rundown, and I said, I'm not sure I want Jaylen Brown on my team because I'm not sure he's not just a younger version of James Harden, but I don't know that he's ever going to have the in his prime offensive outburst that James Harden had. I just see a whole lot of a guy that, as good as he can be in the regular season and make one of the All-NBA teams and do the kind of things that make you take notice, when it's crunch time, it doesn't look like he's any better than the player that everybody loves to hate in Houston.
I'm not a fan of the Jaylen Brown to Houston conversation. In fact, I'm done with the idea of Jaylen Brown in Houston for for 2 reasons, namely. Like, one, you're going to have to pay him extreme money. Whether, to me, you can still give, you can't quite give him the supermax if you trade for him, but you can give him max dollars.
Well, you do sign and trade.
You can do sign and trade too. So, you're looking at trading a lot of draft capital and then spending maximum money for Jaylen Brown. So, that scares me on 2 fronts because you're trading for him, giving away tons of assets to trade for him, and then you're giving him the huge contract. I've seen a lot of conversation of Jalen Green versus Jaylen Brown as offensive players. If you trade Jalen Green for Jaylen Brown, then you're getting a better offensive player. I'll concede that Jaylen Brown is a better offensive player today, May 30th, 2023. I'm not sure that Jaylen Brown's going to be a better offensive player than Jalen Green over the course of their careers, though. Jalen Green right now at the age of 21 is kind of close to Jaylen Brown from an offensive-only point of view. I'm not talking about both sides of the floor. But if you go back and you look at Jaylen Brown in his second year in the league, he's nowhere near Jalen Green. Jaylen Brown's second year, and granted, he was on a much better team, but he averaged 14.5 points his second year in the NBA at the age of 21. Jalen Green at the age of 20 just averaged over 22 points a game. I'm not convinced that Jaylen Brown has more offensive upside than Jalen Green does.
It's apples to oranges in a lot of ways, but the 2 that are most glaring to me are, one, the fact that you can't compare Jaylen Brown now to Jalen Green then. But when you go back then, the other thing that's more important is Jaylen Brown was playing on a really good basketball team. He didn't have the keys to the entire franchise in his back pocket to do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, with a coach that just gave him the ball and got out of the way and never tried to make him play defense or do other things. Whereas Jalen Green can just free stroke and isolate and do whatever he wants to do, go one-on-one, and there's no repercussion, so he just keeps doing it. So that's why it's tougher to say. But I think that as you look at it, the bigger thing is we don't know what Jalen Green can be in the playoffs because he hasn't been there yet. And he's only 21 years old. And you're not paying him a boatload of money. And Jaylen Brown, because he made one of the All-NBA teams, is Supermax eligible. He's going to cost you way more. He's going to cost more in the neighborhood of $50 million a year. And you've seen him in the playoffs. And you've seen him when you needed him most. And because you already have a trained eye for what it's not supposed to look like at the biggest moments in the playoffs, thanks to James Harden, you should have gotten flashbacks like I did last night and said, I'm not sure I want that guy either. And again, we go back to social media and Twitter. Every Rockets fan was like, I bet they'd take KPJ and Şengün and the number 4 and call it a day. I think Boston is going to look for a lot more than that. They're going to try and raise the ante to get as many assets as they can to build around Tatum if they so decide to split those 2 guys up. I think it's a pipe dream on Rockets fans' perspective. 1, not to make the comparison to Harden, and 2, not to understand he's going to take a whole boatload to go get.
And speaking of Harden, I'd rather have 2 years of Harden than 4 years of Jaylen Brown. And everybody's like, whoa, what did he just say? And a lot of people are having those conversations because those are the 2 top names that the Houston Rockets have been rumored to have interest in or acquiring this offseason. And people compare James Harden to Jaylen Brown. that's not what you should be comparing, because you can sign James Harden as a free agent. You're not giving away any assets. You're not trading for James Harden. You're signing him for nothing. So the conversation shouldn't be Harden versus Jaylen Brown. The conversation should be Harden and whatever you would take to acquire Jaylen Brown or Jaylen Brown. And for some of these rumors that have been out there, like Jalen Green has been rumored for Jaylen Brown. Alpi Şengün has been rumored for Jaylen Brown. The fourth pick has been rumored for Jaylen Brown. And we have no idea what the trade proposal or package would look like, but I'd rather have James Harden for 2 years and all of the pieces that are rumored for Jaylen Brown than 4 years of Jaylen Brown. It's not a James Harden, Jaylen Brown conversation.
No, but Jeremy, you're right. Because the one thing that in all these conversations I've had both on air and just with friends and basketball colleagues is if Jaylen Brown was a free agent, it would still be a risky proposition because of the amount of money and the length of the years. And we talk about this from an Astros perspective, but no matter what Tillman is doing and how he's doing business, whether you agree with it or not, in terms of building this team and running the Rockets, I don't think that anybody's going to want to give Jaylen Brown 7 years at $50 million. I just don't think that that's, and I don't think that's the right move for this Rockets team with the young guys you currently have on the roster and the number 4 pick in the draft. But at least with Jaylen Brown, if he was a free agent, it would just be a matter of dollars making sense. But when you start talking about multiple assets and the things you're going to have to give up just to get him, and then on top of it, you're going to have to pay him, and you're going to probably have to pay him, like I said, with an agent that has anywhere near a sound mind, a minimum of like 5 years, I don't think that it makes any sense at all for the Rockets. You know how anti-Harden I am. And you know that he has said he wants 4. But if it's 2, it's at least something that I can stomach, knowing that it'll get you through, it'll put you on the radar, it'll do some things that the owner wants you to do. I'm very concerned about what it could do for the stunting of the growth of the rest of the roster, including and starting with Green.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's an easier pill to swallow than the long-term ramifications, financially and otherwise, the price you have to pay to go get Jaylen Brown. And then you don't know if he's going to be any better than what he's been with the Celtics.
Yeah, if Brown's just like a second-tier superstar and you've mortgaged your future for Jaylen Brown, it could really set you back a lot. Todd says I'd trade Jalen Green just to get rid of Jalen Green.
I think that's starting to be a stronger opinion.
He says he's an AN1 player. A lot of people said he's an AAU player. Here's where I'm at with Jalen Green, though. I want to see him with a good coach before I'm getting rid of Jalen Green.
I don't disagree with that because you and I both talked about they've gotten little to no coaching over the last couple of years, and especially him since he's been in the league. And if you get a true guy that you know has been there and done that can get the most out of him, develop his skill sets, but also teach him how to play defense, understand how to rotate, do the kind of things that NBA basketball players need to understand. Maybe we haven't seen the best of Green yet, and maybe that's a good thing. But to me, I go back to the comparison of Russell Westbrook when he was in Oklahoma City with a guy like Jaylen Brown who, whether he thinks it or the Celtics think they need to move on. A lot of the guys that have played Robin to a Batman think that they need to be Batman too. And then when you realize that when you put them in the Batman role, they never should have left being Robin because they can't handle it. It's different. People used to say for the Warriors all the time, Klay Thompson should have been a Batman if he went anywhere else. But Klay Thompson never had to face the double teams because they were coming at Steph. Klay Thompson got a ton of open shots and didn't have to create on his own because it was created for him based on the other players on the floor. You put a Russell Westbrook or a Klay Thompson type and put him in the Batman role, it's a lot easier to defend and it's a lot different scenario.